Hi there, Chris from TotallyEV, and here doing a dedicated audio review of the Land Rover Discovery Sport. If you'd like a detailed review of the P300e plug-in hybrid model, do check out on your pop-up banner, down in the description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now to kick things off, we're going to talk about its audio configuration. And here we've got the stock 6-speaker setup, which outputs 180 watts. This is comprised of a single 165mm woofer drivers found within each of the 4 doors, and 25mm tweeters found towards the front of the cabin as well. Now if you want to bolster the experience, you might want to go for the 400-watt Meridian sound system that comes in at roughly £630, and this will also give you 13 speakers in total. Go up to 15 speakers, you've got the Meridian surround system, and this will go up to 650 watts, but also cost you a pretty penny at £1,260. Of course, it depends in terms of the trim level or variants you go for, so it might come as standard, so it's worth checking the overall price list and or brochure to be sure. Now for you to tinker around with the audio drivers, at least in the stock configuration, you can go through the infotainment system, and here you'll find a 2-band equalizer. It's a shame that you can't separate the mid and high frequencies, instead they're lobbed into the treble EQ. Now as such, I've actually reduced the treble EQ by 2 notches and taken 3 notches off the bass EQ. Of course, this is very subjective, but these are my own settings. For you to connect up to the infotainment system, you've got Android Auto and Apple CarPlay in a wired format only, at least at the time of filming, as wireless connectivity might be available at a future date via firmware updates. And of course, you've got the Bluetooth connectivity, where the SBC and AAC codecs are supported only. Now before proceeding onto a sound demo, I should just quickly reference the cabin noise. Now at a standstill, when the car is completely off, it's around 35 to 36 dBA, although when the car is just in a standstill mode and it's being operated, I notice a little bit of a kind of whining sound, and therefore it goes up to around 42 dBA. Now while driving at 20 to 30 miles an hour, it's between 54 to 56 dBA, driving at 40 miles an hour, 60 to 62 dBA, and while driving at 70 miles an hour, this goes up to 72 to 74 dBA. Of course, it will depend also in terms of the tire noise that you have, but in my opinion, the overall cabin noise is acceptable, although one might have potentially wanted a little bit of a quieter cabin given the price tag of the vehicle. And now we get onto a sound demo. The song I'll be using is from Priya J. The song name is called Falling. You can hear it for yourself down in the description below, or indeed purchase it if you like. I'll be placing the camera and microphone in 4 separate locations and playing back her track.
Reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always sink, and now the thing is my imagination is constantly racing 1,000 miles ahead. I'm living in my own mind, but it's floating. I'm always hoping, but when I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always sink, and now
Now I appreciate an audio demo over YouTube isn't exactly ideal, but nevertheless, let's get on to my subjective opinion. Now first off, with the sub-bass frequencies, I feel that is a little bit lackluster. It's almost no surprise over here because you don't have a dedicated subwoofer, and as such it means that the overall sub-bass tones are somewhat cut short. The woofer drivers found within the 4 doors have got their work cut out. Now the same could be said about its mid-bass response, whereby there is a lot of presence over here, and so much so that I actually took off quite a few notches in terms of its bass EQ, but here I think it will suffice and give you plenty of excitement when you're listening to, let's say, more exciting tracks out there. So for example, let's say R&B or dance music, which have that more mid-bass presence. Now on the flip side, its mids are really recessed and pushed back, and unfortunately, due to having the mids and highs locked into the singular treble EQ, it means that, well, you can't really bolster up the mids or add extra EQ in this domain. And here you could argue to say, why did you take a couple of notches off the treble EQ? And that's because in stock configuration, at least in my opinion, it was a little bit harsh and sibilant at the top end, and therefore I had to take a little bit off that zing, and therefore again further brought down that mid-range and made it even more recessed and pretty disappointing. And on the flip side, the highs do extend pretty well, and as I did mention, it can get a little bit sibilant and harsh at the top end. Of course, it depends in terms of your own hearing range, but I had no over complaints or inherent issues when it comes to the high-end extension. Now, what really lets down the system, at least in my opinion, is the overall soundstage. Given the fact that we've got a relatively large cabin, one might have expected a potentially a little bit more of an airy sound, and it was surprising because the audio drivers are shared across the Land Rover Discovery and the Range Rover Evoque, and yet my experience with the Evoque was a little bit more positive when it comes to the overall soundstage. But here the Discovery Sport feels just a little bit claustrophobic, and the instrument separation is not just quite there, and as a result it meant that the overall soundstage and the experience I got when listening to music was just, well, not that impressive, specifically for a vehicle that costs upwards of £45,000, at least in the plug-in hybrid model. And so you can potentially gauge my verdict on the audio system. It's not that impressive, and I was actually taken back because the Discovery Sport shares a lot of similarities with the Evoque when it comes to its audio setup, but yet here the Discovery Sport just seems to be a little bit more lackluster across the instrument separation and overall soundstage, and therefore even further gives you a worse experience when it comes to its mid-range reproduction. Now, I'd be intrigued to see if you were getting the Discovery Sport and you're into audio, would you get the Meridian audio system? For me, it would be a no-brainer. I would absolutely go for the Meridian audio system, even though it costs a pretty penny. I think it'll be definitely worth the investment because the audio experience you get as standard is not all that impressive, at least not in my opinion. So if you've liked this video and want to see more, definitely do drop a like, and of course subscribe and hit that bell notification, all of which will be greatly appreciated. And as such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.